I went to my friend and I said to him, why is it that Bilam was punished? God said, okay, go with them. And then he went, and then God's anger was flared, his wrath was flared. Why was he punished? And the answer someone gave me said, because there's the unwritten thing. Your daughter's asking you again and again and again, you want to do a thing, you want to do a thing, you want to do a thing. You're like, no, you know what? Do the thing. But she knows it's not your will. And so what Jeremy said about his blessing to us, we really want to do God's will. And this Torah portion is such a beautiful portion because it has to do with blessings. Jeremy's talking about blessing the children, and I agree. To me, probably one of the penultimate moments in my entire week is blessing my children at the Sabbath table. And, I say, who's going to get Abba's special bracha? Who's going to get, is it you? Is it you? And I says, no, me. And then I put my hands over her head and she closes her eyes and I bless her. And then I kiss her cheeks and then I bless Shiloh, who's squiggling and he's a year old. But it's such a special moment. It's a moment of blessing. And this week's Torah portion is about blessings. But there's so much to talk about, but I don't have that much time. So I just want to start, by talking about how this Torah portion has yet another instance of idolatry. I mean, how much idolatry can we commit? It feels like there are hundreds of instances of idolatry throughout the Tanakh, and those are only the ones that are written. For everyone that's written, there's probably 1,000 times that aren't written. I mean, we see in the Torah, in the Judges, the prophets, the writings again and again. It's perhaps the most repetitive theme throughout Jewish history. I mean, we talk about what a stiff-necked people we are, just like give it up already. But I'll tell you, earlier in my Torah journey, I would view these serial idolaters as backwards fools. I mean, who prays to the sun? Or even stupider, they bow down and worship these carved statues of their own making, right? They crafted it themselves with their own hands, and then they worship it. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. I mean, for them to throw away their relationship with Hashem, to betray the Rock of Israel, Tzur Yisrael, who redeemed them from slavery and has proven true to his word throughout history without exception, for a statue that they carved with it was just unfathomably idiotic to me, for me to wrap my mind around. But now I think I'm a little older, a little bit wiser, hopefully, probably not, I don't know. But now I don't think I judge them as negatively. I empathize with them. These stories are now, for me, I think they're cautionary tales. They're tales of what can happen when we lose awareness and allow the very human psychological impulse to feel powerful, to feel in control, to allow that impulse to take over and to dictate our actions. Because if I'm gonna be honest, I've spent more than enough time in my own life, teetering on the edge of idolatry, if not committing the sin myself on one level or another. For, who among us hasn't had a moment of fearing flesh and blood? Who hasn't had a moment of putting our faith in someone that we perceive as having some sort of power over us? And so we fear them and put our hopes in them. It doesn't need to be an actual idol for it to be idolatry, because the idol wasn't, actually the statue in some ways. The idolatry was the belief that there was some independent source of power in the world other than Hashem. So whether we're building a calf and declaring that to be the God of Israel, or we're getting angry and thereby declaring ourselves God, we know what should be, and this is not what should be. Idolatry can take on many forms and many different gradations. Anyways, there were different idols in biblical times. There was Molech and there was Nehushtan. There were many. And each one contained its own illusion of power and said something not only about the idol itself, but about the people that worshipped it. So let's get to the portion. So this portion, Balak, we see a beautiful behind-the-scenes testimony of Hashem's love for us. This cocoon of love and shield of protection within which Hashem nurtures us despite our many sins and rebellions and idolatries. And we see that while Bilam was one of the greatest prophets in history, no matter what, he was powerless in his desire to curse the Jewish people. He could only bless them. But pay close attention here to those blessings, because we can see that he was able to figure out from the words that he heard emerging from his own mouth, he was able to figure out how the Jewish people could be cursed, how they could be harmed, how they could be defeated. So here we go. Let's look in chapter 21 chapter 23, verse 21. I'm sorry. He does not look at the evil in Jacob, and he sees no perversity in Israel. Hashem, their God, is with them. So Bilam realized, oh, so if there would be perversity among the Israelites, their God would not be with them. So what did he do? He advised the Moabites to send in their daughters to seduce the Israelite men, not only with their bodies, but with their idolatry, with their idols. And that's what I want to talk about right now. The idolatry with which these Moabite women seduced the Israelite men, because it was a very strange and disgusting type of idolatry. It's one of the most disgusting and intriguing types of idolatry. It was called Baal Peor. And at the risk of grossing you out before breakfast, if you're across the world, the worship of Baal Peor was the worship of one's own excrement, feces, otherwise known as poop, or in Israel, kaki. While this is unquestionably disgusting, there are a lot of insights that we can glean for today about how the worship of this idol is, perhaps more than any other idolatry, the worship of this idol is on the rise in the world today. Perhaps, I think particularly in Western countries, they're leading the charge with the Baal Peor idol and bringing that almost by force to so much of the world. So what does Rav Jacobson point out about this revolting idol? He explains Baal Peor is the worship of waste. And what is waste? What is excrement? It's that which is left over after all nutrition and vitamins and life and vitality has been extracted from the substance. Right? It's the Jewish understanding that Hashem gave us the Torah, not to tell us that we can't enjoy this world. We're not ascetic monks on a mountaintop disconnecting, rather to tell us how we can enjoy this world, how we can derive pleasure from this world in the most godly, sacred way possible. How we can derive pleasure by infusing God into this world, because every pleasure has a godly source. And by following God's laws and his decrees and his ordinances, he tells us how we can harness those pleasures of this world to connect with him and to infuse the world with his presence, because pleasure is a force in the world. It's a force. It's a powerful force. And like anything else, it can be twisted and distorted and perverted. And the greater the pleasure, the greater the capacity for that perversion. And when you see it that way, I don't want to get personal here, but America is leading the West in the revival of the legacy and worship of the Baal Peor. Because by literally worshiping waste, one is stripping the pleasures that are supposed to be harnessed to bring life and connect with Hashem. They're stripping these pleasures from all life and vitality and nutrition and fruitfulness. And by stripping them of all of that, they're stripping these pleasures of divinity and of godliness and leaving them empty and void and dead. And when you start looking for where the worship of the empty, godless pleasures are, you see them everywhere, from the white flour and the white sugar that is stripped of all nutrition and health and vitality. It's addicted millions, causing obesity and heart attacks and misery and death. And then, of course, we have the glorification and the adoration and even legislation that is enshrining and worshiping the sterilization and the mutilation of children to allow them to be free in their pursuit of sexual perversions, that they themselves, these perversions, are stripped of all fruitfulness themselves, stripped of every last ounce of life. Everywhere you look, you see the glorification of waste and refuse and death. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at these millions of people that are worshiping and revering these twisted, dark perversions, and I wonder, what's going on? Has everyone gone mad? Like, what is this all about? But then when we immerse ourselves in the divine, eternal truth of Torah, we see, oh, this is nothing new. It's not new. It's just a different manifestation of the same ancient idolatrous death cult. And so where does this leave us? How do we fight this? How do we get empowered by this? And I think the answer is in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. Hashem says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you. Set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that both you and your seed may live. They worship death, So how do we respond? By choosing life, by looking at our lives and seeing where we may have stolen pleasures, or we may be choosing death over life ourselves, whether it's by guarding our diet or guarding our tongues or guarding our eyes. I bless us, my friends, that we choose life. May we choose life together. And through that choice, that we're able to connect in the deepest way possible to the living God that sustains us, the living God of Israel.